There is so much we need to do those first 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks of school before any actual teaching. And you can't get to that teaching unless you do this stuff in the first place. Otherwise, your teaching is going to be a lot harder. Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode in Adventures of Comprehension. Get ready because we're going to dive into 5 things you need to reconsider at the beginning of the year when it comes to teaching reading. Make sure to drop me a comment and let me know where you're from and what grade you teach. I love seeing all of the teachers' names and locations in the comments, so make sure to let me know. Now we're ready to dive in. Number 1, do not assume that your students know what reading is. Even if you teach 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. Now, if you ask them, and this is a fantastic opening question for your students, ask them what reading is. See if they can come up with a definition. Put them into groups. Ask them that question. Have them work together to come up with a definition that the whole group agrees with. And then find all those definitions and write them up all on the board and see if you can come up with a holistic definition just based on what the student said. And then, this is what I love, have your own definition of what reading really is and then compare. What are they missing? I promise you that students, even in the higher grades, will come to you with a definition of something like, reading is when you read words on a page and it tells you a story. Nothing more than that. I've done this so many times that I know down to a T that this little experiment of asking this question always works. Now, that means that students truly don't understand what reading really means. They don't understand that reading is thinking. The word thinking has got to be in their definition. Otherwise, they're only doing half of the job. They're only doing half the work, and they're not going to get the benefits out of reading that we need and want them to get. They need to know that reading is that give and take relationship between themselves and the author. They need to know that words have meanings and that those meanings are going to change based on whether or not I have schema. Their meanings are going to change based on the experiences we have. Their meanings are going to be different from one reader to another. There is so much you can put into this definition of what reading is that you're going to have a fantastic conversation to really get the ball rolling. I also love incorporating things like real reading versus fake reading. What does it mean to really be reading? Do a T-chart with your students. Focus on what you want your students' brains to be doing while they read. Are they accessing their schema? Are they monitoring their thinking, aka using metacognition? Are they asking themselves questions? Are they visualizing? Not having this conversation with them at the beginning of the year, we're basically not setting up what our expectations are for our students. Number 2, wait to start your curriculum. Stop jumping straight into that pacing guide. I know the pacing guides that we are given always start week 1, that we should be teaching week 1 or week 2 even. There is so much we need to do those first 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks of school before any actual teaching. And you can't get to that teaching unless you do this stuff in the first place. Otherwise, your teaching is going to be a lot harder. Here's what I mean by that. Are you taking time to get to know your students? Now, I don't mean doing the fluffy team breakers or icebreakers or team challenges. I mean you getting to know your students. Do you know their interests? Do you know their likes and dislikes? Do you know their family experiences? Do you know what makes them anxious or scared or worried or excited? Do you know about their feelings that they have inside? Do you know what books they like to read? What books they don't like to read? All of this information is going to impact your ability to teach them reading later on. Another thing, are your students' brains ready to be readers? The pacing guide is ready. You may be ready. You need to ensure that you've taught them all the things that there is to lay the groundwork the beginning of the year to get them ready to be readers. Also, how are their strategies? These make the biggest impact on their level of comprehension. I have had so many 4th and 5th grade teachers come to me and say, I assumed my students could visualize. That's not the case. They struggle big time. Even my best readers can't visualize. Well, it's because we don't take the time to teach these things at the beginning of the year. We don't take the time to assess to make sure that our students are able to use those active thinking strategies. And if they're not using them, main idea and summarizing and context clues and all of those other skills are going to be really hard to teach. I want to share with you 10 areas that I always make sure to cover at the beginning of the year before I start any curriculum. So when I said wait to start your curriculum, these are 10 things that I make sure to cover before I start. Number 1, what is reading? Just like we spoke with number 1. Number 2, laying the groundwork. This is all about getting your library ready, making sure they understand what independent reading is, taking time to do independent reading conferences or initial reading conferences. Then I always teach about the brain. What does the reader's brain look like? And we dig into that, neurons and dendrites and all that information. I take time to get to know my students. So we do all the things that we just mentioned, interests, likes, dislikes, feelings. Then I talk about schema. Then we spend time on building curiosity, because building curiosity and having a curiosity-centric classroom is going to make so much more fuel and fire for my students than not spending the time to do that. Then I make sure to, like I said, to focus on strategies, metacognition being a big one. Then I also teach on teaching conversations, teaching students how to have a conversation. And then finally, I teach about growth mindset. Hey everyone, so sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure that you are loving the content coming from Ciera Harris Teaching on YouTube. So make sure if you are loving this to subscribe and also like and comment below. I would love to hear from you. So we are ready for number 3 on things to reconsider at the beginning of the year when it comes to teaching reading. And that is to always teach schema first. You want to make sure that you're teaching your students how to access their schema. You want to make sure that you're teaching your students how to assess their schema. Like, is their schema helping them at all? And then you also want to make sure you're teaching your students about multiple perspectives and how schema can impact one student's comprehension over another. So this conversation is great because it helps build compassion and empathy and openness in your conversations to know that everyone's going to come to the conversation table about a text possibly with a different viewpoint. And when that happens and they understand why that happens, because it's based on our schema, they're going to be more open, 1, to share, and 2, to accept others' ideas. All right, we're ready for number 4. Have you taught them to think? So what does this look like? 1 is metacognition. Do your students know how to monitor their own thoughts in their brain? Teaching our students actively how to think, how to monitor their thinking, and drive their own thinking is going to be a very powerful tool for you to establish the beginning of the year that, again, you can use all year long. Another thing that goes along with metacognition is teaching fix-it strategies. If we give our students fix-it strategies to match and pair with their thinking, then they've got the tools to do what they need to do to independently be successful when reading. And then another thing you want to make sure with this whole thinking process when teaching it, to teach about the give and take relationship between them and the author. When they are doing nothing but reading the words, they're only doing half the job. You have to make meaning of those words. You have to extend your thinking beyond the words. You have to see how those words have impacted your life in some way. So teaching your students how to think is crucial for success, not just the beginning of the year, but all year. All right, we are ready for number 5. The 5th thing is building a culture of collaboration. There's something that happens every year with teachers. we teach and then we ask students to collaborate. They get into groups or they get into pairs or partners or whatever it may be, and then arguments everywhere, right? There's someone arguing and they're fighting, or they're not talking at all. They don't know what to say. So it could be both ends of the spectrum, and then we get frustrated. But then I always go to those teachers and say, how much time have you spent teaching them how to collaborate? Spending time at the beginning of the year to teach them how to have successful conversations. Teach them how to disagree with one another. Teach them how to talk about a text. All of those pieces being taught at the beginning of the year in intentional ways, again, is going to set you up for so much success later on. I want to know before you go, which one of these 5 are you planning on making sure you have room for? All right, friends, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you all next week for another episode. Until then, stay happy. Bye.